All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Comfort from msdynamicsworld.com, and we're here for a session all about EDI Facts for Dynamics 365 and AX. Our primary presenter today is Glenn McPeak from Data Masons. We will be leaving time in today's event for questions, so please do enter them through the Q&A block at any point. As we get started here, I'm actually going to hand it off to Dennis Bruce from Data Masons to get things started and move things along. So Dennis, welcome.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, well, welcome everybody. We appreciate your time today. Thank you very much. This is a continuation of a session that we did at the ACSUG Summit 2017 out in Nashville last month. And so this is about the top 10 reasons from an EDI perspective what to look for when using Dynamics AX, Dynamics 365. The session was given by Glenn McPeak, who will be talking here in a minute. Just a couple of housekeeping things. Everybody's on mute. And if you look in the top right-hand screen, right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the Q&A button with the question mark. Please submit questions using that, not using the chat button. But if you need to chat directly with me, you can do that also through the chat button. But if you want to put questions in, which we will hold till the end, and I'll read them off, and Glenn will go through all the answers, we'll do that. So please use the Q&A button for that. But if you want to talk directly to me because there's something specific, you can use the chat button. And this will be recorded. The session will be recorded and will be available on our customer portal as well and be sent out through MS Dynamics World. And I think that's about it. So without any further ado, Glenn, it's all set.
Well, thank you very much, Dennis. The intention of our presentation today is to share some of the experiences that our organization, Data Masons, as well as our customers and our partners have seen over the years. As you can see on the screen, I've been working with the Dynamics AX product, previously known as DamGuard Exapta, going back to 1999. So we've seen quite an evolution of the platform over the years, and we've seen a lot of changes, definitely many for the good, but some for that made life difficult for other people. And we hope to share information today that will help you and your customers find the best options for implementing integrated EDI with the Dynamics 365 AX platforms. So going back in time, as I said earlier, I started working with the Exapta platform back in 1999, and the version that was available at that time was version 2.1. So there's been a progression of releases since that time, and today we are at the Dynamics 365 for operations as being the current platform and release. And going back in time, there were different capabilities for integrating data and handling the types of things that a company that needs to do business transaction processing with their partners and any organization that touches them electronically, and even integrating internal systems as well. So these are the types of vehicles that Microsoft provided over the years. So going back to older versions like 2.1 and 3.0, there was actually an EDI module that was eliminated in the version 4 platform. So, for some folks, they're often surprised to know that there was actually a quote EDI module which Microsoft decided to remove because of its limitations as being an embedded module, and they decided to go for a more holistic type of integration strategy, which brought about the AIF in Exapta 4.0. And AIF, in conjunction with the .NET Business Connector in that platform, were the two ways to do integration. At that time, Microsoft was suggesting that the AIF was the better route, and there was the first inklings that the .NET Business Connector would be eliminated at some point because it wasn't viewed as being scalable or extensible. So the AIF became the platform of choice for a long time. Data Masons used it quite extensively and quite successfully over the years. But of course, with Dynamics 365 and the radical changes that was introduced in that platform versus AX 2012, many changes were made as far as integration is concerned. The primary reason that AIF was eliminated in Dynamics 365 was because it wasn't really going to support scalability in a cloud environment. And they subsequently introduced a new framework which is based on OData based entities that are accessible through web services as well as through file imports. The file import approach is the DIXF, which stands for Data Import Export Framework, which was originally delivered in 2012, but now has become a lot more of a capability. However, the DIXF for day-to-day type business transactions isn't a great fit because it is more intended for homogeneous data, and probably one of the primary uses of it is to do file conversions, so doing data conversions coming from earlier versions of Dynamics AX or from other platforms where you're trying to get the data loaded into the system. But for transactional processing, it doesn't really provide the type of error trapping, feedback, etc., that you get with an OData entity. And the other value in the column, the final column on the right, CDM stands for Common Data Model, which is based on the OData framework. So kind of another layer with the OData framework to make it a little bit easier to do integration, but the real engine behind it is the OData entity-based framework. So Microsoft's changes over the years kind of threw the wrench into a lot of the, let's say, integration strategies that companies had used, and so those types of changes were something that a lot of people wish they had known well in advance. Now, Data Masons has been involved in the development of EDI-related solutions for nearly 20 years, and we're very much focused from an ERP standpoint. So we understand ERP. It's kind of in our DNA, and we know that the first thought when it comes to solving an EDI integration challenge is to go to the ERP and start writing code to handle all the challenges that come about with doing business electronically with parties that have different business rules, different processes, different formats, different references for values. And so that is a relatively complex undertaking. And you can definitely code your way to some level of a solution. But that coding compromises your ability to move forward and puts more burden on the ERP to do things that it wasn't really intended to do. So the customization can be very complex. If you're going to write your own, it's going to take time. It's also going to take a lot of money. And then supportability becomes an issue. And because there's multiple pieces typically involved, the points of failure increase, you know, when you look at the end-to-end model going from the partners into the Dynamics 365 platform and back out again, and AX for that matter as well. So a lot of people that we talk to are on older versions of Dynamics AX, you know, as old as version 4, which was released over 10 years ago, AX 2009, which was released in 2008, and even original versions of 2012. And when we talk to them about their future strategy and future state, a lot of times we hear, we can't upgrade. Well, why can't you upgrade? Because we have too many customizations to do those upgrades. Well, at the time that you're implementing AX, especially if companies are listening to this this presentation and are implementing AX or D365 for the first time, the appeal of the development framework to adapt to your business requirements is incredible, and it's quite valuable, and we are big advocates of what it does. But we do think that there are a lot of things that should not be attempted within the ERP, and that includes trying to embed EDI solutions inside, because you're dealing with processes and oftentimes mandates that are out of the control of your organization and can't really be predicted. So you may understand how your business works and apply customizations into the platform to meet your business needs and how you want to, you know, be unique relative to your competitors. But when you have outside parties that may have limitations, may have a different view, perspective on things, or may just simply want to push the cost of business down on you, when you've got these outside pressures and timelines and requirements that are hard to predict, embedding the EDI can be a road with no end. Data Masons has been involved in ERP rollouts, and specifically with Dynamics AX and Dynamics 365 over the years, and we've probably been involved in at least 250 of these types of project rollouts. And the rollouts have varied from very well planned, very well executed, met the timeline and the budget, to the project never got launched. And a lot of times a lot of the challenges come back to EDI and the fact that the project team is not factoring it into the overall plan. And the fact is that EDI really requires the solution to be and the project team to be very cognizant that to do it properly, you need a fully functional ERP platform to do the type of volume testing, the type of scenario testing that enables a company that has a pre-existing EDI function to successfully make that move onto the new platform and keep running continuously in their business and not have any business interruptions. And we've been brought into a number of projects where ERP never got up and running and EDI was the culprit, because of volume, because of lack of functionality, because of a variety of different things. So EDI can have a big impact on the ERP rollout. A lot of companies that we talk to over the years have their own EDI department and their own mapping teams, and they use, you know, a variety of different tool sets, you know, products like Microsoft BizTalk, Trusted Link from GXS, Sterling Integrator, Sterling Gentran, and those products don't really help a lot in terms of making the final transactions go, but into the platform. But they want to preserve their investment in that tool, i.e., all the maps that they've made. But sometimes the cost of keeping those types of tools and the fact that you do need heavy customization to support them inside the ERP doesn't really produce a great ROI. And so they've, you know, we've again talked to companies that have gone down that path, and then they realize that, hey, you know, when we look at it really in its completeness, it doesn't make sense for us to be in the mapping business because it's really not our core competency to handle EDI. Another type of situation that we've encountered over the years is where companies do have some form of EDI capabilities, but they're relying on a single person to make it all happen. And then when that person is not available, they struggle. So we recently had a large project go live with a company that had previously had a single EDI person who, quote, programmed everything in their legacy system. That person decided that they were not going to work anymore. And so the company went through a long, painful process of having no ability to troubleshoot and to manage their EDI. So they had to rush their implementation because they didn't have that support mechanism. So support should be a big factor in any company's consideration of EDI providers. A lot of companies in our industry talk about managed EDI services, and there's certainly a great deal of value in it. But understanding what managed means is important, and that sometimes, quote, managed means that they take care of maps or something along those lines, whereas most companies want someone to deal with all the issues, whether it has to do with integration into Dynamics AX or D365, or it has to do with partners complaining about issues, or it has to do with transport of the data or reconciliation of the transactions in the data. And that to us means that the entire process from end to end, from the partner into the ERP and from the ERP back to the partner, that's supported completely by one managed services organization. So it's important to understand what managed services means, and that's something that a lot of people find out the hard way, isn't what their didn't meet their expectations. So the nature of an EDI system is something that's very important to understand, because some organizations approach it as, well, it's just a file. We're importing a file and we're exporting a file from the ERP. And that is a naive view of what really needs to happen. And at the end of the day, different types of businesses for the same trading partner, say a company like Aldi or Home Depot or Walmart, Amazon, they have different relationships with different partners. They send data differently. They expect it back differently. And there's a lot of machinations in the middle that requires quite a bit of business logic and business rule processing. So it's important to understand that the true nature of it is much more than just reformatting data and doing a, quote, import and an export of data. Now, it's funny because we recently saw a post on one of the user group, Dynamics user group portals where companies were talking about their EDI options, providers, projects that didn't go well. And one of our customers happened to post a quote, which is shown at the bottom of this slide, which where they're sharing with another company that if you talk to us, you might find that the cost of our solution is higher than other companies. But when you look at the overall cost, all factored in over time, that the cost could be much lower. And that really has to do with the type of costs that are very hard to foresee when you're making an evaluation and how they impact your organization, especially if your organization is growing or expecting to grow, or you're looking to increase your efficiencies by the use of integrated EDI technology. So something to factor in. And then finally, a lot of companies go into their AX and D365 project implementations, and they kind of bring their prior provider with them, and they say, well, you know, they did a good job with us on our Infor platform, so, you know, this is just another system, so let's give them a crack at it. Unfortunately, getting up to speed on integrating into these platforms is a major undertaking, particularly with Dynamics 365. While Dynamics 365 opened up integration much more than what you had in prior versions of Dynamics AX, the vehicle to get there and get whole transactions made requires a lot of technology savvy and functionality on the part of the provider. So kind of bringing them along, thinking that's one less thing I have to worry about, can actually introduce a much larger challenge later on when you're trying to implement. And then when it comes to ongoing support, not understanding how the ERP system works really makes it more difficult for the EDI provider to deliver what I would call good support. So ERP knowledge, experience does really count when it comes to owning an EDI platform. So with that, I know that some organizations are looking at what they're doing with their EDI strategy as far as AX and D365 is concerned. And so I thought today we would share with you what our solution and our platform looks like for Dynamics AX and Dynamics 365. Now, the strategy that Data Masons has taken as far as EDI is concerned is to sit outside of the AX and D365 platform and handle what we consider, you know, the heavy lifting and transformation of the data from what is received from the outside world into the Dynamics back-end ERP system. And to that point, the solution has its own user experience, its own dashboard that makes a lot of sense. And one of the great things is that it's portable as you go through each version of Dynamics. So users that are on Dynamics, AX4, 2009, 2012, and even Dynamics 365, they're dealing with the same solution, same user interface. Now, what our approach and going back to our ERP focus is to look at things from the standpoint of ERP transaction life cycles. So a very common term in the world of ERP is the concept of quote to cash or order to cash transaction life cycles. And when I click on this menu bar, you can see the processes that take us from, in my case, from a purchase order through to the application of cash and all the processes that can be executed in between. That's customer-facing process. When it comes to supplier-facing process, you've got the same concepts here in that sort of process flow. A lot of our customers deal with logistics and transportation organizations, including 3PLs or public warehouses. And so you see these process flows laid out in a way that's easy for people to understand. And if you're in the automotive supply chain, what those process flows look like, product management, et cetera. Now, the key thing with what VantagePoint does is it provides a lights-out automated solution for EDI going in and out of the Dynamics platform. So I have Dynamics 365 open on the screen here. And in my demonstration today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to download an EDI purchase order and transform it into a live sales order. So let me open up my demonstration company. So these are the current sales orders in my environment. The most current is number 833. And what we'll see in a moment is a new transaction created, number 834. That's the next one in sequence. And the way that I'm going to bring that transaction in is simply to turn on our automation system. Right now, the automation is turned off. Normally, this is running 24/7, 365. But I have the ability to turn it on and off for a variety of reasons. That, of course, during an implementation, I wouldn't want to have automation running while I'm doing my testing. But in production, we're normally having this run all the time. And what you see are process flows. We refer to them as workflows. So, for example, the concept of a purchase order coming inbound, we consider that a workflow. And that process executed, it's scheduled to run one time when I start up the system, start up the workflow scheduler system. And it's designed to go through a series of steps. And in my case, these steps are to download data from a remote system, like a VAN mailbox or an AS2 FTP, secure FTP, whatever the method of transport for that data is going to be. The send PO to D3FO process is the process of transforming that raw data into a message. In the case of D365, it's a JSON formatted message that's got all the data that D365 is looking for. Correct customer number, correct item numbers, correct units of measure, correct pricing, everything that we would want to happen before that data is handed off to D365 is going to show up. And then finally a report, which ironically just popped up on the screen, for a copy of that document as it was transmitted by the partner. If I come over to Outlook for a second, which is down here, we can see some of these documents coming in. So this is a copy of the purchase order that I downloaded, which you're going to see in a moment in Dynamics 365. And so this is a formatted report with automatic document distribution to me. So this was an originating EDI PO that was transformed into a nicely formatted document that was emailed into my inbox. So the concept of report distribution is part of that workflow scheduler system that you see here. But most importantly, that data was integrated into D365. So if I hit the refresh button, I now have a new order, 834. And you can see the requisition number here is MSDW, November 15. And the important thing about this process is that I took something which I'm going to open up right now. So I've got a link in D365 right from the sales order screen where I can look at the originating data that came in from the partner. So this is what I really downloaded. This is the real data behind the scenes. And it's fairly cryptic looking, a little bit difficult to understand. If I want to get a better understanding of it, I can click this button right here and generate a nicely formatted report for that same information. So now that information is starting to make a little bit more sense. But if I drill down in here, and I get to the items, you'll see that the values that they're transmitting has nothing to do with the information inside of D365, on the surface. So something's got to figure out how to take that information and turn it into what D365 is expecting. And that's what VantagePoint does without customizing D365. So again, here's a sales order created by VantagePoint in D365, referencing values like the delivery address, to the right partner ID, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a normal fulfillment process. And during a fulfillment process, you could make changes to the order. So maybe change the delivery date, change the quantity, change the price, and we want to communicate that back to the partner. And I can use this a standard process like sales order confirmation to communicate that information back. So when I post this transaction, VantagePoint is going to detect that a confirmation has been done for a partner, or for a customer specifically, that would like to see a purchase order acknowledgement sent back to them. And so that's what that process is going to initiate. I'm going to continue in the fulfillment process, and I'm going to generate a picking list against this order. And in my Vantage Point demonstration, I'm working with a public warehouse or third-party logistics provider to ship our goods. And so that process is going to initiate a signal to Vantage Point to start transforming the information from that pick list back to the warehouse. And you'll see I'm going to start getting notifications, which, by the way, can be disabled. You don't have to get notified every time something happens. But it's going through and getting this information and sending it out. Now, if you have a customer that is looking for a dispatch advice or an advanced ship notice, Vantage Point will monitor for those types of transactions as well and deliver a document accordingly. So I've got the trigger for in my demonstration environment based on the packing slip. So posting the packing slip is going to generate my advanced ship notice. And then finally, the invoice posting process, which I'll go ahead and print this invoice, and I'll generate it to the screen so we can see the invoice itself on screen, and we'll also show it in that Transaction Lifecycle Explorer screen in a moment. So you'll be able to relate data from within Dynamics 365 versus the EDI data that Vantage Point is transforming and transmitting out to my partner. Again, all of these steps that I'm doing is standard functionality in Dynamics AX, and Vantage Point is watching the system with automated processes that picks up and transmits out the data automatically. So I just generated an invoice. The invoice number is CIV 000740, so effectively invoice number 740. And if I come back to the TLE that I showed before, and we'll just go ahead and refresh the screen. We now see more transactions related to this purchase order, MSDW November 15, and it includes the purchase order acknowledgement that came off of the confirmation, a warehouse ship order that came off of the picking list journal, an advanced ship notice that came from the packing slip, and then the invoice. And you'll notice that the invoice number is the same as we saw on the screen a moment ago, number 740. So it's a complete life cycle of this transaction from beginning to end, which is a huge advantage when you're researching information, and it puts the power of seeing all this information in the hands of your business users, and their access to this can be controlled by your team. So as I mentioned earlier, the data that was transmitted on the originating PO is a bit cryptic, but that's standard EDI type formatting. And the data going out, which is coming back from AX, is also in a similar type of format. So that was the PO acknowledgement. Here's the invoice that we generated, okay, in a format that my partner is looking for from us. And again, if I don't like to look at that type of data. I can look at it in more of a human readable form. So you don't have to be an EDI guru to understand the data that you're seeing here. And one of the advantages of doing business electronically with another party is the ability to get functional acknowledgments exchanged back and forth. And so VantagePoint makes sure that all the transactions that are transmitted are acknowledged, and all the documents that are received are acknowledged. And if not, they show up here in this column as being acknowledged or not. If I click on the acknowledgement button, I get to the actual data that was transmitted. So if they said, hey, I didn't receive an acknowledgement from you, I can say, no, we did generate it, but I can regenerate it and send it to you again. But here's all the information that we did send. So, so pretty neat stuff. As I mentioned earlier, I was receiving a number of emails from the workflow scheduler, including reports that help us make sure that, you know, transactions don't fall through the cracks. So if your organization has ever dealt with advanced ship notices or dispatch advices and have had, let's say, situations where shipments arrive before the ship notice, which can cause operational problems for your partner, we have reports that detect that information and allow you to be proactive in following it up. So in this case, what you're looking at is a report that was delivered to my inbox that says, hey, are there any shipments right now in AX or Dynamics 365 that hasn't been processed from an EDI standpoint? That's what that first section is saying. And in my case, all the shipments that have been produced have been transmitted. But in the second part of the report, it's now looking at the acknowledgement code and saying, hey, is there anything that might be amiss? So in my case, I've got a number of ASNs that have been transmitted that are waiting for a response from the partner to say, I received it. And it's these type of reports that is, you know, built into a framework that can save your organization a lot of time and money, and really sets VantagePoint apart from your typical tools that doesn't have all these types of processes and functions built in to help make the EDI implementation and ownership experience, you know, easier. This is kind of illustrated when we look at all the different documents that we support with the AX and D365 platforms, both to and from the back-end system. So we've got this huge library and catalog of integrations as well as predefined maps that enable you to onboard new partners and new relationships much more quickly than trying to build it yourselves or having someone else build it for you. So these are some of the things that we've learned and hope to share today in this presentation. So hopefully I've been effective in that regard, and I'd like to open up the floor to any questions that folks may have had during this presentation.
Yep, that's great, Glenn. Thank you very much. Okay, as I mentioned to everybody, Q&A. If you have questions, we'll go through those now. Please use the Q&A button, top right-hand corner. You'll see the question mark. You could submit them, and then I'm going to read them off, and Glenn will answer. And if we don't cover your question or to your satisfaction, right there on the screen, dmsales@datamasons.com. Submit your questions through that. There are a number of us in the sales organization that can get answers for you to those questions. So if you have anything that we don't get to today, or you want want to have another conversation about a little more in depth, we can absolutely address that for you. So Glenn, as you were talking, there was a bunch of questions that came in. Let me just start reading them off and you can address them. You started talking about integration, or really more in import methods into AX. You mentioned the DIXF. So if somebody's utilized that in AX 2012, and then they move to D365, does that upgrade to D365, the use of the DIXF, or does it have to be completely re-engineered?
Well, I don't think I would use the word re-engineered. The DIXF is based on importing data from a file format. Now, I can't say that the file format is going to remain constant, but the import DIXF capability is definitely going to continue, and in fact, there's more capabilities in D365, so you shouldn't lose the ability to utilize the DIXF import that you had in place in the AX platform.
Okay, next question. In terms of operational challenges to support EDI, packing, labeling, palleting, does Data Masons potentially see that as an integral component of EDI, since compliance to vendor requirements is key to the success?
Absolutely. Well, the answer to that question is absolutely. The concept of cartonization, palletization of items, and having the corresponding labels in the correct spots is very critical to success. Now, Dynamics AX 2012 R3 introduced advanced warehouse that supports that type of functionality and labeling as part of what it delivers. So Microsoft was thinking the same way. Now, VantagePoint has its own pack and ship and labeling capability. So not everyone needs or wants a full WMS, but we certainly have thought about it, and we provide a pick and pack and labeling capability in our system. But we also, of course, support the labeling and packing and data collection solutions that are out there. We've worked with a number of companies that do those sorts of things, such as RF Smart. We've got many customers that utilize their capabilities, as well as, of course, advanced warehouse and R3 and then D365.
Okay. If a business starts small with EDI, with the overall view of growing the number of partners that they have, at what point do they get a positive return on investment from a typical EDI solution?
Well, the word there's one tough word in there, typical. So I can't really speak for a typical EDI solution, but I can say that the return on investment has got to be looked at from several standpoints. For one thing, the elimination of non-value-added functions that are often pervasive in organizations. So having someone key punch data into a computer screen is usually not adding a lot of value to any organization. And being able to take that person's time and efforts and redirect them to helping add value into the organization should be part of the factor of an ROI analysis. The other factors are the elimination and removal of errors from processes. You're not going to get rid of every possible error, but you can get rid of a lot of the data entry and interpretation errors that happen, day in, day out in a manual data processing environment. So saving money on mistakes, shipping the wrong items, shipping the maybe price errors, destination errors, the wrong items, those sorts of things could be very costly for organizations as well. So the other part of the consideration is the ability to acquire new customers. Some customers won't do business if you want to work with them through, you know, the old method of maybe emailing transactions or mailing transactions or whatever the case may be. You know, they'll insist on an integrated process. So having something that lets you affordably interact with them could be part of the ROI calculation to be considered.
Okay. I'll add just one little point, and I made this point at Summit. It depends on how you look at EDI. Do you look at it as a cost, or do you look at it as an investment? And that's going to drive a lot of your decisions going forward. Okay. Do you anticipate the Data Masons dashboard / UI being presentable within 365 as an applet, perhaps, to benefit from single sign-on and single consistent presentation layer?
Well, I want to say that VantagePoint supports Active Directory and Azure Active Directory. And so the concept of single sign-on is, you know, in a sense, once your credentials are out there, you should be able to access it, you know, without any additional, you know, credentials. As far as being able to view the applications, I think you saw that you have access to the data in VantagePoint from within D365. Being able to render, you know, we've kind of taken more of the app approach. You know, I didn't talk about, but we have an app for, you know, iOS and for Android for managing the scheduler. The scheduler itself that you just saw is a Windows app. We do have some browser-based screens, and we do intend on adding some additional access to VantagePoint from within D365, but I don't know what the capability to render that information is going to be. But we do have plans to make it even more tightly coupled in appearance.
Okay.
But without customizations. We're very adamant not to customize the D365 platform.
Okay. Next question. If a business wishes to change its invoice format, how is this then remapped in order to maintain EDI? I'm assuming this means if the trading partner decides to change the format of the outbound invoice, but that's the way I'm reading this. Is this in the hands of us, as in the customer, or do we need Data Masons to handle and or modify?
So the answer is that our customers have the choice to do their own mapping. So you can modify the formats, create new formats. You don't have to buy anything from Data Masons beyond the standard solution and the mapping system itself. But you also have the choice not to get involved in that as well. So you can purchase maps, or you can create maps, and you can even do a combination. So you could, you know, create your own invoice maps, but, you know, purchase advanced ship notice or dispatch advice type maps. So basically the choice is with our customers, how they want to handle it.
Okay. And then just as a follow-up to that for everybody, if you do license maps from us as part of maintenance and support, or if you're in a subscription model as part of the subscription component, managed compliance, it comes with that. And what that means is that if a trading partner comes to you and says, hey, we're changing the structure of this invoice, that's covered. Okay? We make those changes to the map and redeploy them in the production environment at no additional cost to you. It's all built into the licensing. Okay, in terms of integration to existing trading partners, are they all maintained and up to date proactively, even if the customer is not pushing this particular vendor for a change, or excuse me, pushing the customer for a change?
Well, I'll point back to the one of the slides that I showed, which was the lawnmower versus the Bear aspirin bottle. And to say that some partners will roll out changes only to certain suppliers. So we don't make the decision, meaning Data Masons, or even your company, what is going to change and when it's going to change. Instead, that's dictated by your suppliers, your customers. So you have to respond accordingly to them. So we don't force changes into your environment unless it's mutually agreed upon by the partner and, of course, our customer. So we don't just update our customers' formats based on the partner making the change. We make sure that only the customers that are expected to change receive the change.
Okay. Do we use IIS to make web services available to vendors and customers?
We do. We use IIS as the basis for the APIs that enable access to Vantage Point, to the functionality in Vantage Point.
Okay. Somebody's moving from AX 2009 to AX 2012. Is it worthy to move directly to OData, or shall we maintain AIF and migrate later when going to D365?
Okay, so that's a very good question. And basically it boils down to the amount of change that you want to take on when you make that switch to D365. So the two schools of thought are, let's change our EDI solution first, get that set and working, and then move to D365. As I mentioned before, you've got the same platform that works with both versions, so 2009 and D365. And the migration from, say, 2009 to D365 is not that great. So all the maps that are sent out to the outside world are the same, and the underlying data is the same. So it's one less thing to take on as a new change when you go to D365. The other school of thought is, let's change everything at once when we go live on D365. And, that's a definite possibility, but it's really a preference of what, how much change is acceptable for your organization at once.
Okay. So there is, Jason, I'm reading your question that's something specific to your organization, so it's probably not best to read it out loud into this type of format. So I'm going to reach out to you directly, and we will discuss that. I'll discuss that directly with you. So I'll send you an email after this webinar. All right, Glenn, just a couple of other questions. Let me see. Here we go. Vantage Point users, how much effort to migrate EDI from Dynamics AX 2012 to D365?
The effort boils down to the maps that send data in. So the maps that are sending data into the AX platform are geared towards XML and AIF. And the maps in D365, they're JSON format through OData endpoints. So the amount of change from that standpoint isn't all that great, because oftentimes one map works for multiple partners. So there might only be one map to create sales orders, and it's just a matter of applying that map, testing it, tweaking it, and that work is done. As far as the outbound is concerned, the change is, the same concept, the map that that retrieves invoice data, that retrieves shipment data, that retrieves. It's a matter of getting that information to come back into VantagePoint in a manner that's consistent with what's being done in the earlier version of AX. So as a further example, let's say you're on AX 2009 and you have a custom packing system for ASNs. Now you're going to use Advanced Warehouse in D365. We have to make sure that the net result of the data that goes into VantagePoint populates the same way that in D365 as it does in AX 2009, so that when you do go live, that your partners are still getting the same exact result. And as a result, the short version is that the amount of effort is really relatively minor to handle an upgrade. And it's just a matter of validating that the processes and the maps that we deploy is populating data into D365 an acceptable way for your organization, and then that the data being retrieved is populating VantagePoint the same way.
Okay. Couple of quick questions because I know we've passed the hour limit. Do we offer support in the European time zone? I'll take that one. The answer is yes, we do. We currently have support for the European business hours now, and then starting on January 1, I believe we'll be 24 by 6. So 6 days a week will be 24 hours a day across the globe. Can you do your own mapping? Yes, Glenn mentioned that before. You can license our mapping tool and do their own mapping yourself. If we want to run the system on-prem and then move to the cloud later, Glenn, is that possible?
Yes. So you can run it on-premise and then move it to the cloud later.
Okay. And then right now, Yolanda, there's a question that Jason Gumbert will answer for you. I see your question regarding this, how to access this recording. And then finally, one last question, Glenn. Let me just make sure I read this properly. So they already have a solution for 2012. Okay, hold on. They have a solution for 2012. Can we use the system while the other system is running so that we can get it and replace, or do we have to replace it all at once?
No, VantagePoint works with other systems. So we've had customers phase in our product while an existing EDI system is in place, and it's just a matter of getting those typically we do it partner by partner and phase the system in, so you don't have to do one big bang implementation with the solution. So the answer is you don't have to do it all at once. You can phase it in almost virtually every circumstance that we've encountered.
Okay, perfect. And I get one last question. If they want to migrate to D365, is it better to move to D365 first, then implement EDI, or can they implement EDI now and then move up to D365?
Okay, so I take that question as there's no EDI in place right now, and should we implement it with AX now or D365 later? If there's no pressure to implement EDI, if there's no urgent need right now, it's probably better to go to D365, get stabilized on it, and then implement EDI. Because, it's one less step, because you would go through the implementation process and then you'd have a migration. With going directly to D365, there's less time and labor because you don't have, quote, the migration process that needs to happen, even though it's not that great. So if you have pressure now, and it would relieve pressure on your team to handle the implementation, because oftentimes the people are doing all the data entry and double entry into web forms and that sort of thing, you need their time to help implement 365. then it might make sense to implement EDI now.
Okay. I don't see any other questions, so we've pretty much got through all that and crossed the hour. So, well, first of all, everybody, thank you very much. We appreciate you spending. Sorry we went over, but great questions from everyone. Again, you see the screen, dmsales@datamasons.com. If we've not answered anything to your satisfaction, need additional information, want to have a private conversation, just email us at that, and one of us on the sales team will get back to you, and we will answer everybody's questions. Thank you very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Glenn. And with that, we're going to wrap things up. We did record today's event. We will be sharing a link to get access to that for all of you. So with that, we'll conclude today's event. Have a great day, everybody.